Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Today is September 30th. This is the last lecture before we have our first exam, which will be a midterm exam. That will be next week. I believe I mentioned it a little bit last time, but I want to go over it again this time. First and foremost, I will be putting up an announcement about it this afternoon, okay? And I will go over the exam a little bit more in detail, but let me just say now, it is an in-class exam. Okay, I'm going to have it available on Monday or Wednesday. Pick a day, show up either one, and it's fine. But I do want any student who is not under quarantine to come and take it in class. If you are under quarantine, don't come here. But I would like you to get in touch with me so we can discuss proctor arrangements, because it does have to be a proctored exam. The exam itself is like the kind of test that everybody has always taken. I'm going to have some multiple choice. I'm going to have some short answer, and there's going to be an essay. I will put 2 essay questions on there, and you will pick the one you want to do, okay? I'll go over all of this in an announcement this afternoon, so read the announcements, okay? Within the modules, there's a study guide. Who's seen the study guide so far? Yep, and so that's good. It's just a bunch of terms, but if you understand those terms, then that means you're following along well. Nothing is on the exam that isn't covered in the modules, okay? It may not have been covered in the lectures because we can't get into everything, but the modules themselves do have all of the information. There's nothing that I'm going to pull out and put on the test that I didn't cover in that material. That's the way that I teach. So get ready for the exam next week. I've also got to point out, tomorrow, Quiz 3 opens up. Okay, and Quiz 3 has to be taken by Sunday night at 8. We know that. It's Module 3. We see that. Also, by Friday, you need to participate in discussions 5 and 6. By Friday at 8 o'clock. Those are also there. Some people have already done that, but there's still some that haven't. So Quiz 3 opens tomorrow morning. We've already taken 2 quizzes, so we know how that works. And I know 12 minutes is no fun. Sorry. The discussions are due Friday night, and next week, Monday and Wednesday, we have exam 1. If anybody has any questions, any concerns whatsoever, please get in touch with me. Okay, I want to clarify that. And like I said, come here and take the test either day, pick a day. If that can't happen, get in touch with me so we can sort out how we will proctor the exam. And there are ways to do that. And I'm assuming that there's going to be a few that will, because if you're under COVID quarantine, you can't come here. So there we have it. Now, let's go ahead. Today, we're going to talk about feudalism. As we discussed last time, if you see the Vikings coming up to your village, you're about to have a bad day. And the attacks of the Vikings and the harassment by the Vikings, as a result of the lack of any real central authority in Western, Central, and Eastern Europe, led to the creation of feudalism. And we did discuss feudalism last time, is that correct? Did we mention it? I just mentioned it, that's all I did though, right? I just mentioned feudalism. Yeah, so what is feudalism? Simple definition. Feudalism is a social, political, and economic system that creates order in the absence of a strong central government. Very simply, that's what feudalism is. Or that's what it was. That's what it became. A social and political and economic system that creates order in the absence of a strong central government. Under feudalism, wealth and power were held by the landowners. Owning land is what gave a person authority. And a rigid system of nobility emerged to create this ruling class. A rigid system of nobility emerged to create this noble class, to create this class. So the best way to kind of explain feudalism is to sort of talk about the various people that are in it and to draw a little diagram. Wealth and power and land ownership in feudalism operated kind of like a Christmas tree. That's how the structure was. Now remember, there is no strong central government. So at the top of the tree, we have a great nobleman And this great nobleman owns an absolutely gigantic amount of land, more than he could ever possibly farm on his own. Now, he needs friends, he needs allies, he needs people that will back him up, he needs people that will support his authority. And because land is what gives that authority, what he is going to do is divide his land up, some of it, and give it to noblemen beneath him. So he is the great nobleman, and one level below him will be other noblemen that accept land from him. And these noblemen will be called his vassals. So, beneath the nobleman are his vassals that accept the land. Now, these guys need need authority as well. They need power. They need to have their own version of this, so they will divide some of their land up and create vassals of their own. And I'll just put a V for these. It's too many times to write the same word. Some of their land gets parceled out to noblemen beneath them. These guys also do it until there's no realistic land to be divided up anymore. So I keep a big chunk for myself, and then I give more to vassals beneath me. And if the people beneath you are called your vassals, the guy above you who gave you the land is your lord. The guy above you that gave you the land is your lord. So if you're somewhere in the middle, that means you have a lord who is above you and you have vassals that are beneath you. Now, we're talking about less than 1% of the population that fell into this category. The typical people that lived on the land and farmed it were known as serfs. And it's S-E-R-F-S. Serfs are legally part of the land itself. So if you own the land, you own the people that live on it. It is a different version of slavery, but it's effectively the same thing. And from your serfs, you can acquire privileges, wealth, labor, etc. And your job is to protect them and make sure that guys like this don't raid them and harm them. Now, what does it take to be in this system? What does it take to be one of the land-holding vassals and lords? Well, there's two qualifications. There's two steps or two criteria. Number one, you have to be born into a noble family. If you are a serf, you are not going to become a nobleman. If you're born a serf, you're going to die a serf. This is an exclusive club that you must be born into. And who, of course, obviously inherits all of Dad's land and the title, his eldest son. So getting to have this, first of all, means you have to be the eldest son of the guy that already owns it. And you will get it all. You don't split it with your siblings. That's the first criteria. The second criteria is that you must become a knight. You must be knighted, which is the official ceremony that bestows noble status upon you. And over a few generations, a very ornate set of rules and laws emerged to govern how feudalism operated. Some of these were customs, some of these were enforced much more rigidly, but the whole point is we're going to sort out how this works, and everybody is expected to follow it. This is nowhere near as effective and efficient as the centralized governments that had come before, but it maintains a semblance of order. It maintains a semblance of governance in their absence. Well, how do you become a knight? First and foremost, it's important to keep in mind that not every knight owns land. As a matter of fact, most don't. Because you see, the eldest son inherits everything that dad gets, including whatever title he might have here. But the younger sons may also become knighted. I'm going to try to get all my sons into the club. So there's lots of knights running around that are the younger sons that don't necessarily have land. But how do you become a knight? How do I do it? So let's say my dad is a nobleman and I am thus eligible. Well, I don't just inherit it. You got to earn it. At about age 7, I am going to be sent off to live with another nobleman, probably a good long distance away from home. So if I get upset and don't like it, I can't run back to mom and dad. Kind of stuck there. So you got to be a long way away to do this. And once I am there, I will become a page. And as a page, I am simply labor on his estate. I am labor at his castle or whatever it is he lives in. And I do all the work nobody else wants to do. I clean out the stables, I take out the slop, whatever, you name it. My name is boy, his name is sir, and the only answer I know is yes. And this is what's going to happen to me for the next several years. But of course, what I'm also going to do is get a good understanding of how this whole place operates, right? So I'll understand what's going on as I get older. Now, let's say I'm a good page, and I know how to take orders, and I know how to be humble, and I know how to fit in my place, and I work hard, and I prove that I am capable. At about age 14, I get bumped up, and I will become a squire. So, at about the age of adolescence, and as a squire, I will be assigned to an active knight. And once again, I am working for him. My name is boy, his name is sir, and I do whatever he asks me to do. I cook his meals, I take care of his equipment, I take care of his horses, I run his errands, whatever it is. The answer is always yes. But he has an obligation to me. If I'm a page so that I can learn how to do all that grunt work, what does my knight have to do for me in return for all this that I'm doing for him? What's his job? I'm sorry? Exactly. His job is to teach me how to be a knight. He teaches me how to take care of horses. He teaches me how to behave myself and how to act. And most certainly, he teaches me how to fight. He trains me, how to fight with swords, how to fight with axes, how to train horses on a battlefield. All of the things that I'm going to need as a soldier, I learned from him. So it's important that I be assigned to somebody who knows what they're doing and is willing to take that seriously. So now I am going to be trained at about age 21, now that I am fully grown. If I have been a good squire and I have learned how to do the job properly, and the most important lesson from all of this is how to take orders, how to understand my place, how to say yes when I really don't want to. Because under the rules of feudalism, you're going to be ordered around a lot more than you're going to give orders. And so you had better understand what your place is. The big part of all of this is to teach that to everyone. but I do the job properly and I do become a knight. At 21, I am selected. And the knighthood ceremony is something that we're all, of course, familiar with. How does it work? The squire comes down the aisle of a church. This is a religious ceremony. And then what does he do? He gets down on his knees. And of course, the great nobleman or the king comes over to him and says, I dub thee Sir Osis of the Liver, right? And does the sword on the shoulders. Now, why does he take the sword and tap it on his shoulders like that? That's not just for fun. That's to make a very clear statement. What's happening here? I'm sorry, a little louder? Well, you're getting there, right? This is a solemn oath that you as a knight are now taking before God. And what I am doing is reminding you that this sword is right on your neck. And if you don't follow the rules, there you go. It's like taking a gun, pulling back the trigger and say, you are going to follow the rules, aren't you? And of course, you're looking down the barrel of that gun and you say, yes, I will. There's no ambiguity as to what these rules really mean and what happens if you break them. Well, now that I am a knight, if I am fortunate enough to be the eldest son of a landowner, what I'm going to do then is inherit his title and his estate once he buys the farm. If I am the younger son and I get knighted, my job is to try to find someone out there who will give me land, right? And the land that you are given is called a fief. The land that you are given is called a fief. And as the younger son with nothing but the title, I am looking for someone to eventually give me a fief. And I am the boss of the land that I have. I am the nobleman. I own the serfs, if you will. And I can then go about doing everything possible to increase my wealth, increase my holdings, increase my power and position. This can be done through contracts. It can be done through marriage. It can be done through fighting, gambling. There's all kinds of ways that we try to elevate ourselves and start off lower, but end up with more and more land and more power. Well, knights are required to live by a code of conduct called chivalry. Now, this is where a lot of the misperceptions come from, because the official code of chivalry and how they actually acted are obviously two different things. But we all understand the concepts of this code. You must be honorable. You must be brave. You must be loyal. You must be a man of your word. Breaking this means that you are no longer worthy. Again, you are taking that oath with that sword to your neck. The number one rule of chivalry is that you must defend the church at all costs. The number one rule of a knight is that the church always comes first. You must be a devout Christian and always defend the church. And all of the ceremonies associated with knighthood, and there's a lot of others that I'm not getting into, always take place in a church and always have a religious context around them, because all of these are oaths before God. Now, you have accepted your fief, cirrhosis of the liver, and now you get to enjoy your life as a nobleman, but you have an obligation to your Lord. The Lord is giving you the land. Your Lord is giving you your land. You now have an obligation to him. Vassals have these obligations. And so let's list them. Let's list them. These evolve over time. They're not something that happen immediately. And there's always negotiation, and they're not exactly the same from one place to the next. So let's keep all of that in mind. But eventually they do become quite formal. Rule number one. You must fight for your Lord whenever called to do so. You are his personal soldier. Now, what this also means, of course, is that your entire army fights for your Lord. Because it's not just you. You have knights that are in your employ. You have other soldiers of various types. So you have your own personal army. And when he needs to do it, if your Lord, you're the Lord, you are sirloin of steak, okay? And sirloin of steak has just gone to war with circumference of the round table over here. And so what that means is that you're now at war with him. And it doesn't matter if y'all are friends, it doesn't matter if y'all are relatives or whatever, that's the way it is. You are a soldier in his army. And these guys are fighting all the time. And so being an enemy on the battlefield may not necessarily mean you don't like that guy. Y'all could have been great buddies growing up, but my Lord has said we're going to war with you. And a lot of times they all go to war with each other within the same Christmas tree. They're always fighting each other. Keep that in mind. Now, the problem was that the warfare got so common that the vassals started pushing back, and that rule eventually means 2 weeks a year. So you owe your Lord combat 2 weeks a year. After that, he has to ask. Rule number 2, you must give your Lord hospitality, meaning when he is passing through your community, when he's coming through the neighborhood, he gets to stay with you. And that, of course, means his entire entourage as well, because these guys don't travel light. And because he is your Lord, he gets the deluxe treatment. You will put him up in a manner that he is accustomed. And this can be a pretty imposing obligation, as you can imagine. They're going to push back on this, and I think I made a mistake. It's not 2 weeks a year for fighting, it's 40 days a year for fighting. Sorry. 2 weeks a year is the obligation for hospitality. 2 weeks a year is the obligation for hospitality. After that, he has to ask. But for 2 weeks, you are the Marriott for him. Rule number 3. You must come when summoned and give advice when asked. And by this we mean you must publicly take a position on controversial topics. This is an obligation that these guys don't like. It doesn't cost them anything. And you might think to yourself, fine, hey, if somebody wants my opinion, they can get it, right? I'll speak freely. You want to know what I think? Well, it's not so simple. Because you see, what the Lord will do is use his vassals to weigh in on issues that are almost certainly going to create enemies out of each other. Again, we're going back to here, cirrhosis here. Your cousin is, who were you? You were circumference of the round table, and y'all are obviously very close. And he is at war with old Sir Mix-a-Lot here, and you're going to decide who's right and who's wrong. Well, you're about to make an enemy out of somebody, right? Have you ever, your friends are arguing and you're like, hey, keep me out of this? No, you don't get to do that. The rules of chivalry say you have to be man enough to come up with an opinion, to state it publicly, to not be afraid to take a stand when you know it's going to upset people. And so they didn't like this. And it also keeps the big nobleman from having to get involved, right? Hey, this isn't my opinion. I'm going to let my vassals work it out. So that obligation was never fun. And the reason why it became an obligation is because these guys didn't want to have to take difficult positions. Number 4, and there's several parts to this one, and you can see this coming. As a vassal, you must give your lord money. Yep. Cold, hard cash, sometimes. And they push back on this, and eventually there's rules negotiated. One of the rules is you must give him money when his eldest daughter is married. Specifically, you must provide a dower. The women are used as pawns in this system. I don't know a better way to put it. But marriages are always arranged, and they're arranged to make a family, form an alliance, or gain a family's prestige, or something like that. And so if you are the daughter of a nobleman, your husband is going to be selected by him, and it will be for the best interest of the family. There is no discussion of whether or not you like the guy or anything else. But you do not go into that marriage with nothing. You bring land or wealth with you. And the reason why this is necessary, and it's called a dower, is because this is an alliance. This is a deal that we are making between our families. And if 3 or 4 years later, old cirrhosis of the liver here decides, I don't like her, I want to send her back home, he's also going to have to give up that land and wealth. You see, and so that wealth that she brings into the marriage is an insurance policy to make sure that when she gets married, she stays married. Yes. Dower, yes. Yeah. It's a way of making sure that once she gets married, he can't just abandon her for someone else. Once the Crusades take place, you have to pay for his trip on the Crusades. Now, we're going to talk about the Crusades later, but when your Lord goes off to kill the Muslims and reclaim Jerusalem, you're footing the bill. You must pay for the knighthood of his eldest son. The rest are on him, but you have to pay for the eldest. Now, what do I mean by this? I mean you have to outfit him with all of the equipment, the armor and weapons and such. You have to pay for his horse, or more specifically, his horses. All of that has to come from the vassals. Now, what we have to understand here is that the horses that were used by feudal knights were very big and very powerful. Typically, they were Arabian stallions. They were extremely expensive. Only very select horses were capable of handling the weight and the stress that was put on them as a result of the environment. And there's an almost certain chance that you don't have one. You're going to have a whole stable full of them if you are a nobleman of any worth. And if my son is about to get knighted, the kid that will inherit all of this, and my vassals are paying for it, he's getting the deluxe plan. So we're not talking about one horse, we're talking about many horses. We're not talking about one suit of armor, we're talking about many. We're talking about every type of weapon he will ever need. I am going to make sure that this kid is protected as much as possible when he goes into battle. And y'all are footing the bill, and I do not care how much it costs. So this is expensive. Generally speaking, it's hard to equate this into modern dollars, but it's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $300,000 to outfit a knight as cheaply as possible. The bargain basement blue light cost to outfit a knight would probably run you 3 bills, 300 grand. And again, my son is not getting the blue light special. He gets the very best of everything and many of them. So this is an expensive proposition. And so on that note, what would it really cost to live as a nobleman? The lowest ranking nobleman that, again, had fiefs and actually lived this life, in today's dollars would probably have to be worth somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 million. That's the lowest amount of net worth that you would probably need in the feudal context to be able to maintain the lifestyle that these guys would live. Now, when we're talking about the great noblemen, they're the equivalent of billionaires in today's society. There are very few of them, and they are extravagantly, vastly wealthy. I mean, they're at a point where that doesn't matter. And we also have to keep in mind that, gold and silver as currency is kind of rare. I mean, yes, it's used, but there's a lot of gray area between what actually was counted as money at this time, even for them. But that's why it's so hard to calculate. But we're talking about the equivalent of billionaires in the top end of this. Finally, if your lord is captured, you pay the ransom. Now, they don't like having to come and give advice, even though that one's free. And they do, however, like paying the ransom even though that's going to cost them a lot of money. That might seem counterintuitive, but here's the deal, okay? Every one of these guys has a price on his head, and it is understood in advance what that amount is. If you get captured, this is how much the ransom is. Obviously, the higher ranking you are, the more the ransom would be. This is an insurance policy, because what it means is that when we do go to war with each other, we're not trying to kill each other. You see, you're worth a lot more alive than you are dead. So I'm not going to try to kill you on the battlefield. Now, I'll chop your knights up to pieces. I'll chop whatever other, peasants you might get out there fighting for you, but you are safe. So that's the way that works. And so we like the idea of always ransoming each other and always guaranteeing that there is money involved if you get captured. It's an insurance policy. And the highest ranking nobleman, the higher the rank, the more money it is. And there's a fun story coming back from the Crusades. The King of England, King Richard, was actually captured by a German rival, a man who was technically his enemy. And so that was that. And the higher ranking you are, the more your ransom is. And how high ranking is the king? There you go. And so the ransom for him was basically all the money in England. I mean, they just emptied out all the coffers in order to get him home. And for some strange reason, they celebrated whenever he got back. I don't know that I would have been so pleased to see him, but there we have it. And while I'm on the subject, where does the king fit in all of this? There is a king. Where does he fit in this? Well, during the feudal era, the king is nothing more than a great nobleman. Yes, he has the fancy title, and all of the nobility technically are his vassals. In practice, that is not the case. He is nothing more than a great nobleman. He has his own land. He has his own vassals. And frequently, there are other noblemen that have bigger armies, more money, and more power than him. So being the king during this era is really more of a symbolic title than a functional title. It's going to take many generations for a number of these European states to have kings that eventually form national armies and centralize their states and become kings as we would understand a king to be. During the feudal era, not so much. The kings of France for a long time, for example, were actually quite weak. They had very, very little power compared to their nobility. But they did have the title, and they will eventually be able to use that to their advantage. Now, if you do not fulfill your duties, you can be declared forfeit and lose it. Your fief will simply be given up. You don't lose your title, but you can lose your land. And so you will fulfill your duties at all costs, because the consequences are that you lose everything. What about the guys that can't cut it? What about the sons that don't make it as squires, don't make it as pages? Obviously that's going to happen. They're too weak or too incapable, whatever the case may be. Well, the most common way to deal with that is to send them into the clergy. And the clergy at this time is full of sons of noblemen that just weren't knight material. Monasteries in particular, which were priests that live separate from society and sort of fulfill a certain mission, were just chock full of the sons of noblemen that were not capable of becoming knights for one way or another. As feudalism develops, there are other ways to deal with the sons that can't do it. A lot of them would go into business, for example, in towns and cities, and they would become skilled craftsmen or something like that. And of course, they would lose any chance of having noble status by doing that. But the eldest son inherits everything. The younger sons don't inherit a title. They don't inherit anything. So being a younger son can be a problem. And during the feudal era, they are always causing issues. Figuring out, quote unquote, what to do with them is always a thing, because you want to make sure that they're taken care of, but at the same time, you don't want them to screw things up. These guys are fighting all the time. I mean, they are fighting with each other all the time. And fighting means you have to train, you have to practice, you have to stay in shape. So they start practicing together, and they start arranging times where they're going to all show up and sharpen their skills and be ready to fight the next war. And that leads, of course, to competition. You know, who's the best swordsman? Who can throw the axe the best? Who's the strongest? Who's the this? Who's the that? So now we start having organized competitions and organized training, and it's pretty exciting to watch. You know, they show up in their armor and they beat on each other, and wow, let's check this out. So the community starts showing up. And they start seeing this as very real entertainment. And that makes these knights really get into it, because if everybody's watching and now it's a competition and I've got a reputation, I really want to do well. It also means there's going to be a lot of gambling. You know, people start betting on who wins this contest or who wins that contest. And we will eventually see the emergence of tournaments, organized events where the knights in a region would show up and compete against each other. And the competitions would be rehearsing battlefield skills. And there were a whole range of different contests that would eventually show up. And if you want to impress the ladies, or you want to intimidate your rivals, or if you want to make a lot of money by betting, you had better work on these skills and get good at it. Of all the tournament competitions, what is the one that was by far the most popular, by far the most important, and by far the most difficult and dangerous? When we think of these tournaments, what is the one thing that we think of them doing? Jousting, exactly. Jousting was by far the biggest, and jousting is going to be a thing long after feudalism is dead. And you better believe it is ridiculously dangerous. There's a reason why we don't do it today. Charging on a big horse against another guy on a big horse and trying to knock him off with a big long stick, you know, kapow. It doesn't take a genius to figure out what that stick's going to do to somebody at about 40 miles an hour. This is a very, very dangerous competition. And every tournament involved people going home and people going in the ground. I mean, this was just stupidly dangerous for them to do. There's all kinds of accounts of serious injuries and deaths taking place. Jousting was where the most gambling took place too. Just vast amounts of assets were gambled on jousting. One of the most common forms was that the two men jousting against each other would joust for the horse of the loser. And again, you know, in today's dollars, that's just tens of thousands. You know, you're racing for the pink slips, so to speak, when it comes to that. So jousting was a thing. And again, it cannot be done safely. There's just no way that jousting can be done safely if it's done the way they did it then. Now, today, the reenactments, y'all have probably seen the reenactments at the medieval fairs and whatnot. The reason why they're doing that, first of all, it's still dangerous and people still get hurt doing that. But what's going on there is that the pikes that they use are made out of balsa wood. And balsa wood is basically styrofoam. And so, you know, you wallop somebody with that and it just sort of explodes and nobody really gets hurt. As a matter of fact, they actually now have some where about, 10 feet of it is styrofoam, actual styrofoam, and they just paint it to look like wood. So that way, when I wallop it into the guy, it's just gonna, it's gonna show good, but nobody really is gonna get hurt that bad. So that's what that's all about. Modern jousting is not old-fashioned jousting. And it, again, there's no possible way to turn it into a safe sport. It just can't be done. Another big popular event at these, which usually came at the end, was the melee. And that's basically when they all go into the ring together with their weapons and just wallop on each other until one person is left. Here's a depiction of, guy got him in a headlock, right? It's just, I can only imagine what that would have actually looked like. So, how did feudalism end? What happened to it? Well, why don't we start by talking about one simple technology that made it possible. The simplest little invention, which the Romans didn't have, and that is the stirrup. The stirrup is that metal ring that goes at the base of a saddle. There's two of them, and you can put your feet in them while you're riding. Romans didn't have stirrups, as odd as that might be. And what that enables you to do is be anchored in the saddle. See, I want you to think about it for a minute. Let's take a big heavy sword and have your feet just kind of dangling free. If you swing that sword, you're going to go off the other side, right? It's going to completely throw your balance on that horse off. But if you anchor yourself in the saddle with those stirrups, then you can fight from the horse without without falling off. So that's what makes a feudal knight on a horse so powerful. And when you are on that battlefield, that dude on that giant Arabian stallion with those weapons and that armor and years of training, he is a powerful force. You know, cavalry comes from this, and cavalry made the difference between a victory and a defeat on the battlefield in hundreds of battles across many generations. You know, if you were to talk to the men that fought battles during the era where horses were part of the deal, they would tell you the cavalry means everything. You know, it is the cavalry that wins. Well, that's what makes them so strong. It's also going to be technology that brings them down. New weapons will be developed that are cheap, can basically be used by anybody who's strong enough, that neutralize that immense power on horseback. And the first one of these inventions is the crossbow. A feudal crossbow can pierce armor at 200 feet. And of course, it's a relatively cheap weapon to produce. All you got to do is train an ordinary serf to fire the thing. And all of a sudden, that $300,000 worth of armor is useless. And of course, if he hits the horse with it and the horse goes down, you just killed his horse and probably him too when the horse falls on him. Now, the problem with the crossbow is that it takes a long time to load. You know, you've got one shot, and if he's charging at you, you better hope that you hit him. These were generally used as siege weapons. They would have them in castles, and then they would shoot down on the people that were sieging the castles. They weren't so much on battlefields. Now, the Chinese developed a crossbow that could be rapidly loaded. They developed a crossbow where, and the Chinese were good at this. They developed a crossbow where you would sit on the ground and use your feet to pull back the string, and then you'd put an arrow and then shoot that way. And they would just, and a lot of them, the Chinese bowmen would actually stay on the ground. And they would load it and then spin around and then load it and spin around. And they could get off a lot of shots at once. And their crossbows actually were designed so that the shaft could be taken off and it could be used as a bow and arrow too. You could decide how you want to use it. They were really cool. No cell phones, please. So that's the crossbow, and it's a problem. But the real problem comes along when we have the longbow. Because this is much cheaper to make and easier to make than a crossbow, and it is a rapid-fire weapon. You know, a bowman with a strong arm can just lob one arrow after another. A good medieval bowman could actually have 3 arrows in the air at any given time. You know, that's how fast he's shooting. And the arrows were just stuck in the ground next to him, and he would just, you know, pow, pow, and he would just go one after another. And they didn't shoot directly. What they would do is shoot up in the air and rain it down. And so that's what that was all about. A longbow from the feudal era could knock a knight off a horse at 600 feet. Now understand, that's 2 football fields. That's 2 football fields. And with that many arrows flying in the air, they could just rain it down as these guys are charging on their big horses. And of course, all you have to do is hit a few of them, because when he falls, the guy behind him trips on him, and suddenly everybody has fallen over everybody else, and you have wiped out an entire field full of knights, and all you did was have a bunch of schmucks with longbows. This was used during the Battle of Agincourt, just in case you're wondering, you have to write this down. But a much smaller English army just decimated pretty much every nobleman in France when they charged. It was a huge French charge of noblemen, and the English just murdered them all. With a bunch of longbows, and that battle is often considered to sort of be the final blow. Yes, it was called Agincourt, but you don't have to write that down. I'm just throwing that out there. Yeah, it was in 1415, but you don't have to write that down. Anyway, finally, at the end, we're going to see the introduction of gunpowder weapons, and I don't need to tell you what a cannonball is going to do to a guy on a horse. Kings are able to take these weapons, create peasant armies, national armies that break the power of the nobility and centralize the authority in these countries. And so this is where the kings are able to bring these guys under control. Now, we often think of feudalism and the knights as wearing these big clunky suits of armor. And we often think that this is how a feudal knight was outfitted. That's actually not true, okay? These guys wore the chainmail. Y'all saw that earlier. This sort of thing, these big clunky suits of armor, were developed in response to these new weapons. I mean, what they're doing is desperately trying to find a way to make these weapons not work. And if you're wondering, how on earth could anybody fight in something like this? It's heavy and it's clunky, I'm like, RoboCop trying to walk around. Well, you're absolutely right. They couldn't. It was just too difficult to fight in one of these things. The heat alone would just cause a guy to be utterly exhausted within just a few minutes. But they didn't know what else to do, and finally they just had to give up. This specific suit of armor, just in case you're wondering, and there's obviously a lot of them that have survived, but this specific suit of armor was made for King Henry VIII. And it was a ceremonial suit. See, King Henry VIII ruled after feudalism had ended. He was in the 1500s, and this was just a ceremonial suit of armor that they made for him. So that's what that's all about. But you can see it looks tough. You look like the Terminator, but in reality, you can't effectively fight in something like this. It never would work. So at that point, they kind of have to give up and we go somewhere else. But the end of feudalism leads to the centralization of states, kings developing considerably more power, and the emergence of the modern era. And on that note, I guess we're out of time. Like I said, if you have any questions about the exam next week, I do hope you will get in touch with me. Okay, we need to talk about it, but I expect everybody here on Monday or Wednesday. You pick the day, I don't care. And so there we go. Y'all take care. Yeah, if you come one day, you don't come for the next, right? And obviously, I think a lot of you might want to come on Wednesday. I know how students are, but just keep in mind, you come on Monday, you get it over with, right? So keep that in mind.